3 months had passed since the Galactic Confederation formally rejected humanity's request for membership. The galaxy had changed in ways no one expected. Shipyards that hadn't built military vessels in centuries were working around the clock. Ancient defensive treaties between species were being renewed and updated. The peaceful galaxy that had existed for thousands of years was preparing for war. But not everyone agreed with the Confederation's response. Dr. Yunji sat in a small conference room on the Nixari homeworld, preparing for what might be humanity's last chance. The xenopsychologist had spent her entire career studying alien cultures, but she had never expected to become humanity's advocate to the galaxy. Ancient One Luminar floated across from her. Their energy formed dim with what she had learned meant deep thought. Around them, representatives from moderate factions of all three major species waited to hear what she had to say. "You asked me to explain humanity," Dr. Yunji began simply. "To help you understand why we build ships like the Retribution, I'm going to show you something that might be difficult to watch." She activated a holographic display that filled the room with images from Earth's history. The first image showed two groups of early humans facing each other across a battlefield, crude weapons in their hands. "This is how humanity began," she explained. "Not with peace, but with conflict. For most of our history, we have been our own worst enemy." The display shifted to show larger conflicts, armies clashing with metal swords, then guns, then massive machines of war. The aliens watched in growing horror as the scale of human violence increased over time. "The Punic Wars lasted over a century," Dr. Yunji continued. "The 100 Years' War actually lasted longer than a century. Our First World War killed millions. Our Second World War killed tens of millions." Commander Yeltar's crystalline form had turned a deep blue color. "These were wars between different species?" "No," Dr. Yunji replied quietly. "These were wars between humans. We have spent most of our existence fighting ourselves." The display showed the development of nuclear weapons, the Cold War, and the tense decades when humanity had built enough weapons to destroy their own planet many times over. For 40 years, two groups of humans pointed weapons at each other that could have ended all life on Earth, she explained. Not because they wanted to destroy the world, but because they were afraid the other side would attack first. Hive Mind Coordinator Bricks clicked rapidly. "This makes no sense. If both sides would be destroyed, why build such weapons?" "Because we had learned that someone always attacks eventually," Dr. Yunji answered. "In our experience, peace is temporary. War is what happens when peace fails." She showed them more recent history. Smaller conflicts, regional wars, the slow process of humanity learning to cooperate instead of fight. But even the most peaceful periods of human history included military buildups and defensive preparations. "The Retribution exists because we have never known true peace," she concluded. "Every technological advancement we've made has been driven by the need to survive the next conflict. We don't build these ships to attack you. We build them because we cannot imagine a universe where someone isn't trying to kill us." The room fell silent. Finally, Ancient One Luminar spoke. "Are you saying that humanity is naturally violent?" Dr. Yunji shook her head. "I'm saying that humanity is naturally afraid. We've spent so long fighting ourselves that we've forgotten how to exist without the ability to fight." The revelation began to spread through different parts of the galaxy. Some species started to see humanity's militarization, not as evidence of aggression, but as evidence of trauma. A species that had spent millennia at war with itself had developed survival mechanisms that looked terrifying to outsiders. Philosophical advisor Tern of the Nixari was one of the first to change his position. "Perhaps," he suggested during a council meeting, "humanity needs guidance rather than isolation. They have achieved spaceflight despite spending enormous resources on weapons. Imagine what they could accomplish if they felt safe." But others disagreed strongly. Military Coordinator Vash of the Vorthak led the opposition. "Their psychology is fundamentally different from ours," he argued. "They see threats where none exist. They prepare for wars that aren't coming. That kind of paranoia could spread to other species." The debate split the Confederation down the middle. Some species began secret communications with humanity, fascinated by their unique perspective on survival and conflict. Others pushed for stronger isolation policies, arguing that humanity's influence could destabilize galactic peace. On Earth, humanity was having its own debates. Admiral Dong Hyun stood before the Global Defense Council, defending decisions that had seemed obvious just months earlier. "We built the Retribution to protect humanity," he said to President Nayan and her cabinet. "But if its existence prevents us from joining the galactic community, then it has failed in its primary mission." Defense Minister Ji Hai disagreed. "We can't disarm just because the aliens are uncomfortable with our military strength. What happens if other threats emerge?" "What threats?" asked Foreign Secretary Kyung Ho. "The galaxy has been at peace for 3,000 years. Maybe the problem isn't that we're not strong enough. Maybe the problem is that we're too strong." The argument that followed would reshape human policy for generations. For the first time in human history, leaders were seriously discussing military reduction not from a position of weakness, but from a recognition that their strength had become a weakness. Captain Minho found himself at the center of these discussions. The man who had commanded humanity's most powerful weapon was now being asked to consider what that weapon represented. "The Retribution is a symbol," he told his officers during a private meeting. "The question is, what do we want it to symbolize? Human strength or human fear?" Some alien species began reaching out individually to humanity. Dr. Krea, the Kalari tactical analyst, sent private communications to Dr. Yunji. "We've been studying your species' psychological profiles," she wrote. "Your fear-based responses are actually quite logical given your history. But fear can be overcome with time and positive experiences." Similar messages came from moderate Vorthak traders and younger Nexari philosophers. Not all of the galaxy saw humanity as a threat. Some saw them as a species that needed help learning to trust. 6 months after the failed first contact, humanity made an unprecedented decision. Admiral Dong Hyun announced the conversion of the Retribution from a pure warship to a research vessel. The weapons would be removed and replaced with scientific equipment. The marine barracks would become laboratories. The missile storage areas would house exploration equipment. "We built the Retribution to protect humanity from our enemies," he announced. "But we've learned that our greatest enemy might be our own fear." The decision wasn't unanimous. Many humans worried about disarming in an unknown galaxy, but others argued that keeping the weapons had already cost them their chance at galactic membership. A year after the first failed contact, Ambassador Su Jin returned to the neutral zone. This time she traveled in a converted civilian vessel with no weapons and no military escort. Her companions were Dr. Jae Sung, a historian who specialized in human peace movements, and engineer Bo Young, who designed habitat systems for space colonies. The aliens agreed to a second meeting, but the atmosphere was different. Where the first contact had been hopeful and excited, this one was careful and measured. "We understand that our previous approach was intimidating," Su Jin said to the assembled alien representatives. "We want to try again, but this time we want you to understand us before you judge us." Commander Yeltar, who had been one of humanity's strongest supporters before the Retribution's arrival, spoke carefully. "We appreciate your willingness to return, but trust once broken is difficult to rebuild." "We know," Su Jin replied. "That's why we're not asking you to trust us yet. We're asking you to understand us." Dr. Jae Sung began presenting a different picture of humanity. Not their wars, but their peace movements. The people who had fought against violence throughout human history. The organizations dedicated to preventing conflict. The slow, difficult progress toward a more peaceful world. Engineer Bo Young showed them human achievements that had nothing to do with weapons, art, music, architecture, medicine. The things humanity had built when they weren't preparing for war. "We are not asking you to ignore our capacity for violence," Su Jin concluded. "We are asking you to see our capacity for choice. We chose to build weapons when we were afraid. Now we choose to build something better." The second first contact didn't end with treaties or trade agreements. It ended with a small step, an agreement to continue talking. The Confederation agreed to limited cultural exchange, starting with scientific cooperation and artistic sharing. Captain Hyun-woo, now commanding the converted research vessel Harmony II, stood on his bridge watching the alien ships through his view screen. In the distance, the Retribution hung in Earth orbit, its weapons removed and its hull being converted into humanity's largest space-based research facility. "It's not the first contact we hoped for," he said to his science officer. "But it's a beginning," she replied. The neutral zone that had been empty just days before was now crowded with ships. What started as a simple diplomatic meeting between 4 vessels had become something much more dangerous. Dozens of alien ships surrounded the human vessels like a net, each one keeping a careful distance from the massive Retribution. Ambassador Su Jin stood in the Retribution's main hangar bay, watching the alien shuttles dock. She felt sick to her stomach. Everything that could go wrong with first contact was going wrong. The aliens who had been eager to welcome humanity just 2 days ago now spoke in careful, measured tones about security concerns and threat assessment. Commander Yeltar emerged from the Kalari shuttle first. Her crystalline form had lost its earlier warm glow and now pulsed with the cold blue light that meant deep concern. Behind her came Hive Mind Coordinator Brix, their insectoid features twitching with nervous energy. Ancient One Luminar floated from their energy-based transport, their usual flowing movements now sharp and focused. "Welcome aboard the UES Retribution," Captain Minho said formally. He stood at attention with his senior officers, all of them in dress uniforms that somehow made them look more military rather than more diplomatic. "Thank you for hosting us," Commander Yeltar replied. Her musical voice had an edge to it that hadn't been there before. "We are most interested in learning about human engineering capabilities." The word capabilities hung in the air like a threat. Everyone knew this wasn't a friendly cultural exchange anymore. This was an intelligence-gathering mission. Captain Minho began the tour by leading them through the ship's main corridors. To him and his crew, these were normal working spaces. To the aliens, they were a catalog of horrors. "These corridors can be sealed at multiple points," explained Lieutenant Commander Yuri proudly. "Each section has its own life support and can operate independently if the ship takes damage." She was describing standard damage control procedures, but to the aliens it sounded like the humans expected their ship to be torn apart by enemy fire and wanted to keep fighting anyway. "Commander," Yeltar studied the heavy blast doors that could drop down to seal each section. "How often do you expect to need these emergency measures?" "It's better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them," Yuri replied with a smile. The philosophy behind the statement made the aliens exchange worried glances. The humans weren't just prepared for battle. They assumed battle was inevitable. They moved to the Weapons Control Center next. Weapons Specialist Chan Wu demonstrated the ship's defensive systems with obvious pride. "Each point defense gun can track and destroy up to 50 incoming missiles per minute," he explained, pulling up targeting displays that showed thousands of potential targets around the ship. "The system can operate automatically, manually, or in hybrid mode depending on the situation." "How many enemies do you expect to face at once?" Brix asked, their clicking becoming more rapid. Chan Wu shrugged. "You never know. The system is designed to handle anything from a single attacker to a full fleet assault." The casual way he said "full fleet assault" made Ancient One Luminar's energy form flicker with alarm. These humans weren't just prepared for small conflicts. They were ready for total war. The tour continued to the Marine barracks, where Sergeant Hyun Ju showed off the ship's boarding countermeasures. The corridors could be filled with various gases to disable intruders. The floors could be electrified. Weapon turrets could emerge from hidden panels in the walls. "Every human ship is designed to repel boarders," she explained matter-of-factly. "We assume that if enemies get aboard, they'll try to take control of vital systems." "Have human ships been boarded frequently?" Commander Yeltar asked. "Not recently," Hyunju admitted. "But it happened enough in our history that we designed for it." What she didn't explain was that most of those boarding actions had been humans attacking other humans. The aliens didn't need to know that humanity's military technology had been developed primarily for fighting themselves. The engineering section was even more disturbing. Senior Engineer Hae Young showed them manufacturing facilities built into the ship itself. "We can produce most of our own spare parts," she explained. "Ammunition, replacement components, even small vehicles if necessary. The ship is designed to operate independently for years if needed." "Years?" Ancient One Luminar asked. "How long do your military campaigns typically last?" Hae Young paused, realizing she might be saying too much. "Well, we like to be prepared for extended operations." What she didn't say was that human military campaigns had sometimes lasted decades, with entire generations growing up knowing nothing but war. The Retribution was built by people who understood that conflicts could drag on far longer than anyone expected. The final stop was the medical bay, where Medical Officer Soon Young demonstrated their trauma care facilities. The aliens fell silent as she showed them surgical bays designed to operate during combat conditions. with restraint systems to hold patients steady while the ship maneuvered under fire. These facilities can handle massive casualty events, she explained. We can treat hundreds of wounded crew members simultaneously. Hundreds? Brix's compound eyes fixed on the medical equipment. How many crew members do you expect to lose in battle? Soon Young looked uncomfortable. Hopefully none. But space combat is unpredictable. We prepare for the worst-case scenario. By the end of the tour, the alien delegation was silent. They had seen a ship designed by people who expected to fight overwhelming odds, take terrible damage, suffer massive casualties, and keep fighting anyway. Every system, every procedure, every piece of equipment was built around the assumption that conflict was not just possible, but likely. Commander Yeltar was the first to speak when they returned to the hangar bay. Captain Minho, your ship is impressive, but we must ask, what threats do you expect to face that require such extensive preparations? Captain Minho considered his answer carefully. In our experience, the galaxy can be a dangerous place. It's better to be overprepared than underprepared. But we have had galactic peace for over 3,000 years, Ancient One Luminar pointed out. What dangers are you expecting that we have not encountered? The question hung in the air because Minho couldn't answer it honestly. The dangers humanity prepared for weren't external threats. They were internal ones. Every weapon system, every defensive measure, every piece of military technology had been developed to fight other humans. We believe in being ready for any possibility, he said finally. After the aliens returned to their ships, emergency communications began flying across the galaxy. The tour had been worse than anyone expected. Instead of seeing a powerful but peaceful species, the aliens had encountered something that challenged their basic understanding of civilization. Fleet Admiral Zenth called another emergency meeting. Their entire ship is designed around the expectation of prolonged brutal warfare, she reported. Not just combat, but the kind of total war that destroys civilizations. More disturbing, added tactical analyst Kreia, they seem to consider this normal. They don't see anything unusual about building a ship designed to keep fighting after suffering catastrophic damage. Similar discussions were happening across all three species. The Vorthak analyzed the economic implications. A species that spent so many resources on military technology might be planning conquest. The Nexari studied the philosophical aspects. A civilization built around the expectation of violence might be inherently unstable. 3 days after the tour, Ancient One Luminar made the formal announcement that ended humanity's first contact. The Galactic Confederation cannot, in good conscience, welcome a species whose first diplomatic gesture is the arrival of a planet killer, they stated during an emergency council session broadcast across the galaxy. Do not question humanity's right to exist, Commander Yeltar added. But their military philosophy is incompatible with peaceful coexistence. Until they can demonstrate a genuine commitment to nonviolence, formal contact must be suspended. Ambassador Su Jin received the news aboard the Harmony. She sat in her quarters, staring at the formal rejection message, knowing that humanity's dream of joining the galactic community had died before it could really begin. Outside her window, the Retribution continued its patrol patterns, its weapon system scanning the surrounding space for threats that existed only in human imagination. The ship that was supposed to protect humanity had instead isolated them, turning potential friends into potential enemies. The first contact that should have opened the galaxy to humanity had instead closed it off, leaving them alone with their fears and their weapons, wondering if they would ever be welcome among the stars. 24 hours had passed since the aliens learned about the approaching human warship. The meeting had moved to the Kalari vessel Serenity's wing, a beautiful ship with rooms that seemed to grow from living crystal. The negotiation chamber was elegant and peaceful, with soft light filtering through the crystal walls, but the mood had changed completely. Ambassador Su Jin sat at the curved table trying to maintain her diplomatic smile. Across from her, the three alien representatives kept glancing at their data screens. Their earlier excitement about welcoming humanity had been replaced by nervous energy and whispered conversations. Commander, Yeltar's crystalline form flickered with colors that Su Jin had learned meant anxiety. The elegant Kalari had been the most enthusiastic about human membership in the Confederation. Now she seemed worried about something much bigger than trade agreements. Hive Mind Coordinator. Bricks clicked their mandibles together in a pattern that suggested deep thought. The practical Vorthak had been calculating profit margins and resource sharing just yesterday. Now they were studying tactical reports that kept updating on their personal display. Ancient One Luminar had become almost completely still, their energy form barely moving. The wise Nexari had spoken of humanity's philosophical potential. Now they seemed to be reconsidering everything they thought they knew about human nature. Perhaps, Commander Yeltar said carefully, your military vessel could transmit its intentions. Our long-range sensors continue to show it approaching at high speed. Su-Jin nodded, though internally she was running through damage control procedures she had hoped never to use. Admiral Dong-Hyun had promised to keep the military fleet away from first contact. The retribution arriving ahead of schedule could ruin months of careful planning. Of course, she replied smoothly. I'm sure Captain Minho will be happy to explain his presence once he arrives. Before anyone could respond, the ship's communication system activated. A new voice spoke through the chamber's speakers. This is Captain Minho of the UES Retribution requesting permission to observe the diplomatic proceedings. The voice was calm and professional, but something about it made the aliens shift uncomfortably. Su-Jin recognized the tone. It was the voice of someone who had seen combat and wasn't impressed by much of anything anymore. Permission granted, Commander Yeltar replied after a moment's hesitation. We welcome your arrival, Captain Minho, acknowledged. Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, the chamber fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the main view screen, which showed the space around their small diplomatic fleet. The stars looked peaceful and unchanging, just as they had for the past day. Then reality twisted. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of distorted light that made the view screen flicker and adjust. For a moment, the sensors couldn't process what they were seeing. Then the image cleared and every being in the chamber fell completely silent. The UES Retribution hung in space like a weapon made solid. It was 15 kilometers of angular, predatory design that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The hull was matte black with sections of armor plating that looked like they had been forged in the heart of a dying star. But it wasn't just the size that made everyone stare in horror. It was the weapons. Missile pods covered the ship's surface like scales on some enormous beast. Railgun batteries extended from the hull at regular intervals, each one larger than the main guns on most alien vessels. Energy weapon arrays created geometric patterns across the ship's surface, and point defense systems tracked across the space around them with mechanical precision. This wasn't a ship built for exploration, or even normal military purposes. This was a vessel designed for one thing: absolute destruction of anything that opposed it. Hive Mind Coordinator Bricks was the first to speak. What is the purpose of such a vessel? The view screen flickered again and Captain Minho appeared on the display. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and scars on his face that spoke of years of combat experience. His uniform was clean but practical, and his eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had made difficult decisions and lived with the consequences. This is Captain Minho of the UES Retribution, he said calmly. We are here to observe the diplomatic proceedings and ensure the safety of our representatives. Observe. Ancient One Luminar's energy form pulsed with what might have been disbelief. That vessel carries enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet. Captain Minho's expression didn't change. The Retribution is equipped for any situation that might arise. We prefer to be prepared. Ambassador Su-Jin stepped forward quickly, trying to regain control of the situation. Captain Minho, your arrival wasn't part of our agreed schedule. The negotiations were proceeding smoothly without military support. Plans change, Ambassador, Minho replied. His tone was respectful but firm. Admiral Dong-Hyun determined that our presence would be beneficial to the proceedings. The words were diplomatic, but everyone in the room understood what he really meant. Earth's military leadership had decided that humanity needed to show its strength during first contact. The Retribution wasn't here to protect the negotiators. It was here to send a message. Commander Yeltar's crystalline form had turned a deep blue color that Su-Jin didn't recognize. Captain Minho, could you perhaps explain the design philosophy behind your vessel? Our military analysts are having difficulty understanding its intended purpose. It was a polite way of asking why humans had built something so terrifyingly destructive. Captain Minho seemed to consider the question seriously. The Retribution represents the latest in human defensive technology. It's designed to protect human space and human interests against any potential threats. What threats? Brix asked, their clicking becoming more rapid. Our surveys show no hostile species in your region of space. No evidence of recent conflicts or territorial disputes. The question hung in the air because Captain Min-ho couldn't answer it honestly. The threats the Retribution was designed to face were other humans. Centuries of human warfare had driven their military technology to extremes that the peaceful aliens couldn't imagine. We believe in being prepared for any possibility, Min-ho said finally. Ancient One Luminar's form pulsed more rapidly. Your vessel appears designed for planetary bombardment. Are you expecting to face enemies on that scale? Again, Captain Min-ho's expression remained neutral. The Retribution is a deterrent. Its presence prevents conflicts from escalating. But to the aliens, the logic was backwards. To them, bringing such overwhelming firepower to a peaceful meeting was more likely to start a conflict than prevent one. Commander Yeltar began what appeared to be urgent communications with her home world. Brix started transmitting tactical data to the Vorthak Fleet Command. Ancient One. Luminar's energy form flickered in patterns that suggested deep consultation with the Nexari collective consciousness. Su-jin watched her carefully planned first contact meeting collapse in real time. The aliens were no longer thinking about trade agreements or cultural exchange. They were calculating threat assessments and military responses. Perhaps, she suggested desperately, we could arrange a tour of the Retribution. Captain Min-ho, I'm sure our guests would be interested in seeing human engineering achievements. It was a mistake, and she realized it the moment the words left her mouth. The last thing she wanted was to give the aliens a closer look at humanity's military capabilities. But Captain Min-ho nodded. Of course. We'd be honored to host representatives from the Galactic Confederation. Commander Yeltar exchanged what looked like concerned glances with the other aliens. Finally, she spoke. We would be interested in such a demonstration. The way she said demonstration made it clear that the aliens no longer saw this as a friendly cultural exchange. They were gathering intelligence on a potential threat. As the meeting broke up to arrange the tour, Su-jin realized that first contact had taken a turn she hadn't prepared for. The aliens had come expecting to meet a young species eager to learn and trade. Instead, they had encountered something that challenged their basic assumptions about how civilizations should behave. The Retribution hung in space like a dark promise, its weapon systems maintaining constant scans of the surrounding area. To its crew, this was normal security procedure. To the aliens, it looked like humanity was preparing for a war that nobody else knew was coming. And maybe, Su-jin thought with growing dread, that was exactly what it looked like because that was exactly what it was. Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship was beautiful, designed with smooth curves and bright white panels that gleamed under the soft blue lights. Everything about the Harmony screamed peaceful intentions. The humans had built it specifically for this moment, their first meeting with alien civilizations. Captain, we're approaching the meeting point, said Communications Officer Taeho from his station. His fingers moved across the control panel with practiced ease. All systems are running perfectly. Hyunwoo nodded and straightened his clean uniform. Today would be remembered in history books. Today, humanity would no longer be alone in the universe. Ambassador Su-jin walked onto the bridge carrying a tablet filled with notes. She had spent years preparing for this moment. Her diplomatic training showed in the way she moved, calm, confident, ready for anything. She wore a simple blue outfit that matched the ship's peaceful design. Any word from the alien delegation? She asked, moving to stand beside the captain. They're waiting for us at the coordinates they provided, Taeho replied. 3 ships just like they promised. The Kalari vessel is called Serenity's Wing. The Vorthak ship is named Prophet's Edge. The Nexari ship doesn't translate well, but it means something like Wisdom's Light. Su-jin smiled. Even their ship names sounded peaceful. This was going to go well. The Harmony dropped out of hyperspace with barely a whisper. Through the view screen, they could see the alien vessels waiting in the designated neutral zone. Each ship was completely different from the others, but all 3 shared one thing. They were beautiful. The Kalari ship looked like it was grown rather than built. Its surface was smooth and curved, made of what looked like living crystal that caught and reflected the light from nearby stars. It pulsed gently with internal light, creating patterns that seemed almost like breathing. The Vorthak vessel was more practical but equally elegant. Its design was efficient and clean, with geometric patterns that suggested advanced engineering. Solar panels and communication arrays extended from its hull like the wings of some great insect, but graceful rather than threatening. The Nexari ship was the most unusual. It seemed to be made of pure energy contained within a framework of some unknown material. Light flowed across its surface in waves, and occasionally it would shift slightly as if the ship itself was alive and moving. "They're all so different," Hyun-woo whispered in amazement. "Each species developed their technology separately over thousands of years," Sujin explained. "But they all came together to form the Galactic Confederation, a peaceful alliance dedicated to trade, knowledge sharing, and mutual protection." "Incoming transmission," Taeho announced. "They want to establish communication protocols." "Put them through," Sujin ordered, stepping forward to the main screen. The view screen flickered, then split into 3 sections. In the first section appeared a Kalari, a being that looked like it was made of living crystal, tall and elegant with features that shifted slightly in the light. This was Commander Yeltar. The second section showed a Vorthak, an insectoid creature with 4 arms and large compound eyes. Its movements were quick and precise, and it wore what looked like a practical work uniform. This was Hivemind Coordinator Brix. The third section was the most unusual. The Nexari appeared as a shifting ball of energy with no fixed form, occasionally showing hints of what might be a face. This was Ancient One Luminar. "Greetings, humans of Earth," Commander Yeltar spoke first. Her voice was musical like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We welcome you to this historic meeting. The Galactic Confederation has watched your species with great interest. We bring greetings from the Vorthak Trade Union," Brix added. Their voice was more mechanical, translated through their ship systems. "Your rapid technological development has impressed our analysts. We see great potential for profitable cooperation." Ancient One Luminar's communication was different. It seemed to speak directly into their minds. "The Nexari have observed many species rise to spaceflight capability. Few have done so with such determination and creativity. We are honored to make your acquaintance." Sujin stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. "On behalf of all humanity, we thank you for this opportunity. We come in peace, seeking friendship and mutual understanding. Our species has much to offer and much to learn." "Indeed," Commander Yeltar replied. "Our initial scans of your home system show remarkable diversity in your art, music, and literature. The Kalari greatly value cultural exchange. We would be pleased to share our artistic traditions with your people." Brix leaned forward, their compound eyes reflecting the bridge lights. "More importantly, your manufacturing capabilities show great promise. The Vorthak have identified 17 different resources from your system that would be valuable in galactic trade. With proper guidance, humanity could become quite wealthy." Ancient One Luminar's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. "But we are most impressed by your philosophical development. Despite your relatively short time as a spacefaring species, your people have developed complex ideas about ethics, meaning, and existence." The Nexari find this fascinating. The conversation continued for hours. Sujin presented humanity's credentials, recordings of their greatest music, examples of their art, philosophical texts from their greatest thinkers. The aliens listened with genuine interest and shared their own cultural achievements. Commander Yeltar showed them Kalari crystal sculptures that seemed to sing when light passed through them. Brix demonstrated Vorthak engineering techniques that could build entire cities in a matter of days. Ancient One Luminar shared Nexari meditation practices that could supposedly expand consciousness across vast distances. "Your species shows remarkable potential," Commander Yeltar said after reviewing humanity's presentations. "Most species require centuries of careful guidance before they're ready to join the Confederation. But your rapid development and peaceful intentions suggest you might be ready much sooner." "How much sooner?" Sujin asked, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Perhaps decades rather than centuries," Brix replied. "Assuming, of course, that these negotiations go well and your people demonstrate continued commitment to peaceful cooperation." Sujin felt a surge of pride. Humanity was about to join a galactic community that had existed for thousands of years. They would have access to advanced technology, new trade opportunities, and knowledge beyond their wildest dreams. "We should establish formal protocols," Ancient One Luminar suggested. Perhaps representatives from each of our species could meet aboard the Kalari vessel to discuss specific terms of cooperation. An excellent suggestion, Sujin agreed. We can arrange for a captain, Teho interrupted suddenly. I'm receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. His voice carried a note of concern that made everyone on the bridge turn to look at him. Hyunwoo frowned. They weren't supposed to receive any communications during the negotiations except in case of emergency. What is it? Teho's face went pale as he read his screen. Sir, the UES Retribution is en route to our position. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. The bridge fell silent. Sujin felt her stomach drop. The Retribution wasn't supposed to be anywhere near here for another month. Admiral Dong-hyun had specifically promised that military vessels would stay away from the first contact zone. Signal them immediately, Hyunwoo ordered. Tell them the negotiations are proceeding smoothly and their presence is not required. But it was too late. The aliens had their own long-range sensors, and they had detected the approaching vessel. Commander Yeltar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been concern. Ambassador Sujin, she said carefully, our sensors indicate a large vessel approaching from your territory. Is this part of your delegation? Sujin forced herself to remain calm. No, Commander Yeltar. This appears to be an unscheduled arrival. I'm sure it's simply a routine patrol that happened to pass through the area. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. The Retribution was humanity's newest and most powerful warship. If it was coming here, it was for a reason. And that reason was probably going to ruin everything they had worked so hard to achieve. Brix's compound eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. How large is this vessel? Teho checked his readings. 15 kilometers in length, he said quietly. The alien representatives fell silent. Sujin could see them exchanging glances, or at least the alien equivalent of exchanging glances. 15 kilometers was massive by any standard. The Harmony was only 2 kilometers long, and it was considered a large ship by human standards. Perhaps, Commander Yeltar said carefully, this vessel could announce its intentions upon arrival. Sujin nodded, but inside she was calculating damage control. Whatever was about to happen, she had a feeling that humanity's first contact was about to become much more complicated.